You're watching Saki Chronicles.
So you were actually inside, like for real?
I mean, it was only for about 20 minutes, but yeah, the door slammed and everything.
Well, how did you like it?
Cozy. I can see myself doing another 20 minutes.
There he is.
Seriously, I thought you lost your way.
Fuck off, you pasta stain. I just lost track of time, that's all.
No surprise there.
Okay, guys, let's get this thing done. We all got things to do.
Like walking away in the middle of a Medal of Honor ceremony? Was it because there was no hair to sniff?
Keep it up. I got all the time and freedom in the world.
Not likely.
Oh, but you don't, huh? It's all catching up to you, you tweeting idiot. I've seen your mugshot plastered everywhere, looking like Roseanne Barr with angel hair pasta slapped on the hood.
Jesus Christ, enough. We're here to finally rank the Revelations games.
About time.
No kidding. These games were dope and brought back a modicum of the horror that had been missing since 2005.
Just say RE4, you bitch. We all know how you feel about that masterpiece.
I hate to admit it, but I agree with Joe a little on this, Don. But mostly because the first Revelations was so heavily modeled after RE5 in almost everything.
Too true. For Christ's sakes, they basically have the same types of characters from 5.
I don't recall there being very many...
Watch it, Joe.
Ha! Idiot. I mean, whatever RE5 had, Revelations took as well. We have the over-eccentric, annoying dumbass, the thirsty as all hell bitch, the unremarkable one-off partner whom somehow finds themselves being held onto by the hand in the third act. And of course, the bioterrorism plot.
I did notice how most of the RE games that came out between 4 and 7 were based on terrorism.
It's terrorism.
Isn't that a popular word these days?
Never forget, am I right?
Get the fuck out of here, George. He's right, though. And it wasn't just 5 either. I couldn't help but notice a few other similarities to the first game. The hand on the gun. The monster bursting out of the bedroom closet. And the classic journal entry of someone mutating.
I would honestly consider those homages rather than rip-offs, actually.
I agree with Joe.
Fair enough. So let's get started in ranking the first one, but only for the game itself and not the characters. That's for the other rankings. Pros and cons, let's go.
Well, Capcom finally got to make a campaign on a boat to stick, so that's a pro. Sorry about that dead aim.
Obvious pro is that you play as Jill once more. Seeing as how at this point in history you technically haven't played as Jill Valentine in her own game since the remake in 2002. So it was good to see her back in action.
No cap, it was a great decision. And with the third-person camera angle instead of that fucking fixed shit. A masterpiece.
I did like the creepiness of the ship. Any abandoned setting with tight corridors and dark hallways are always a plus for survival horror games, and this does it well. For the first hour or so.
Yeah, once you hit the lighted areas of the ship, all the horror goes right out the porthole.
Nice. I also have to point out that the swimming sections of the game are always the worst. The greatest bane to gamers all over the world are the water levels.
But at least in here it makes sense. They're on a leaking boat after all.
True.
Speaking of things that need fixing, did you all notice how the game became Dead Space once you had to fix the antennae to contact headquarters? And of course, there's a boss you have to defeat in order to get to it.
That shit had me groaning.
Getting out of your easy chair can have you groaning, you fossil.
You fucking trust fund, bitch.
That's not too bad. What had me eye-rolling the most was whenever the next chapter would start and you had the previously screen pop up.
Previously
on Resident Evil Revelations.
That kind of shit was one of the biggest immersion killers in this. It's like I was watching a show on ABC.
Not to mention all the twists and turns that kept happening throughout, like this was a bad M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Or just a regular one from him.
I see dead people walking around like regular people.
But yeah, the constant secrets and conspiracies are so convoluted that it makes Revelation seem like less of a horror game and more of an espionage with monsters in it.
We'll get more into the story when we rank the characters, but for now I want to get back into some of the gameplay. One of the things I did like was the implementation of the Genesis tool. I'm a sucker for researching creatures in games.
You fucking serious, Bear? I hated this thing. You're forced into using it for finding secret items and such, some that actually progress the plot, and don't get me started on doing it during combat.
Yeah, that shit kind of got annoying after about the 4th time of doing it, let alone the 400th time.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I can concede that it does get tedious after a while, and the reward isn't too great either, but at least it helps spice the game play up a bit.
Not enough. The rewards for scanning an enemy is trash. Only giving an herb once it hits 100%, especially when you're capped at 5 herbs, is nothing to cheer about. At least make it do more shit, like research weaknesses on the creatures to help kill them or something.
Speaking of herbs, I'm not sure that I liked how a single herb can completely cure you, regardless of how hurt you are. They couldn't keep the mixing, like in previous games.
How would you mix them? There's no fucking inventory to even look at.
Oh right, the entire inventory is now just the crate for weapon parts. However, the upgrading system is a nice touch. Not to mention only being allowed up to 3 guns at a time keeps things from being too chaotic like 6 was.
The crate was good, I'll admit, but for fuck's sake, why can't Parker use it? By the time we play as him on the ship, we're fighting off a dozen hunters with a level 1 pea shooter.
No shit, that was annoying. I must have died like 3 times during that section.
Skill issue, Orange Peel. Get better.
Fuck you!
Alright, you bickering fucks, where do we put this?
Well, Barry, the story takes a hit all on its own, really. I mean, it's a pretty dope setting and all, but my main issue is that I don't really consider these games canon.
Why the fuck not?
For many reasons, Saggy Joe. None of the side characters ever come back or are mentioned again in either of the subsequent games except motherfucking Kirk Matheson.
What the fuck are those?
This also includes Barry's entire family, as well as the man himself. And most importantly is the fucking Terra Grigia panic.
Come on, it's never mentioned again?
Only in Revelations 2 to explain Natalia's origin. That's it. You have an entire solar-powered city, a man-made marvel, by the way, nearly vaporized by a fucking satellite on live television. This entire panic is nearly equivalent to the Raccoon City incident, yet it is never spoken of ever again outside of Revelations. So I have a hard time thinking these two are canon when someone can just play the core games we've discussed without missing anything. That's like if nobody in the MCU ever talked about Sokovia again.
Okay, so the game suffers a tad with continuity, but the game itself is still pretty peak.
As smooth as the gameplay is in this one, it still reeks of RE5, and I'm not talking about the obvious character models. Capcom was still in their action horror phase at this point, so even though the first chapter is pretty tense, once you pass that, all the uneasiness of the environment disappears. Not to mention that having a partner beside you all the time takes away all the suspense as well.
Jill gets separated from Parker a few times, and during those moments it can get right back to being spooky.
That's disgusting.
Not enough to change my mind. The constant twists in the story, a couple of the turret sections, and the entire Quint and Grinder parts really drug this down. Hell, even the lack of inventory makes this seem like it wasn't a fully fledged game.
That's because it was first made for the 3DS back in 2012, you idiot. It had to be compressed for a handheld system. It wasn't ported onto consoles until a year later.
Well, if anything, that proves my case more. C tier.
Fuck no.
That's harsh, Don. We can't sync a game based on the limitations of the console it's run on.
This game had its flaws, I won't deny that, but overall it's still fun. Playing as Jill is great, and again, gameplay is smooth, and most importantly, it has great replayability. This is a solid B rank.
Yeah, at the very least.
Are you shitting me? B tier for a 4-hour handheld game? I'd rather eat prison food for the rest of my life than agree to that.
Like you're going to have a choice, fat ass.
It's done. We need to move on either way. Anything to add before we do, though?
Yeah, I got a question. When Revelations was revealed to the world at E3, the trailer told an obviously different story than what was given to us.
You think you'll get away with this?
I already have, Jill.
So what was that going to be? Was Chris actually supposed to be evil?
It doesn't matter. Capcom scrapped it like they did with Billy Cohen's character in Zero. He was originally slated to be the final boss, but thank God they didn't go with that.
Yeah, no shit. That would have been fucking terrible. So let's talk about Revelations 2. And I just want to start off by saying that this fucking game not only has one of the best title screens in the entire franchise, but that it was also so lit that it honestly made me feel like I was in some genuinely horrible shit throughout.
No fucking cap. This game came out as if Resident Evil had a nasty-ass 4-way with Silent Hill, The Suffering, and the Saw franchise, while Manhunt filmed it. And none of that is a bad thing.
It's always about fucking with you, isn't it?
Of course.
Everything is fucking.
But you're not wrong, I'll admit. This entry into the franchise was such a breath of fresh air. Pretty solid story, not much camp and no stupid twists.
Well, except for those two.
True.
This one came out a few years after that mess that was 6, and it almost shows that Capcom was trying to pull away from the action horror of what Resident Evil had become. It's like walking into a brand new room, with 7 being what you're entering and 6 is what you're leaving. Revelations 2 is the doorway, and it's fucking great.
Absolutely, but I want to talk about some cons first before Donnie explodes all over the place.
Try and stop me, bitch.
First, yet again, like in the first one, there's the episodic format of the game.
Previously on Revelations 2.
Previously on Battlestar Galactica.
Unfortunately, at this point in Capcom's history, they were no longer the trendsetter like they were back in 2005, but were now trend chasers. 5 was trying to outdo themselves with 4. 6 was trying to emulate other action horror shooters at the time.
We get it, Bear. Capcom was all like,
We've got to have money.
what's your point?
More and more episodic games were coming out since Telltale's The Walking Dead, so yet again we get the previously on screen, but now we also get the next time screen too.
Next time on Revelations 2.
And these things seriously piss me off because it tells you what's coming up. It's fucking Alan Wake all over again.
Wait a minute. I know.
Christ, I hated that game.
I didn't like how there isn't really any bosses in the game either. I mean, you can't really consider the 2 big enemies that come out and take longer than normal to kill bosses, since they come back in droves as regular fodder. So really, there's only like 3 different bosses in the entire game.
Not to shower on your parade, Joe, which I love to do,
Fucking gross, dude.
but technically RE2 only had 2 bosses.
What about the alligator?
Come on, that doesn't even count as a boss and you know it. 1 bullet ends the fight.
Chew on that, you overgrown son of a bitch.
Point. This game also has the stain of DLC on it, and in the worst way too.
Barry, you need to get over the fact that all games have DLC now. It's just an inevitability.
That doesn't mean it gets a pass, but what I mean is that you don't get the full ending of a character unless you buy the DLC.
Natalia?
No, Joe. Moira.
You always have to go for the little girls first, huh, Creepy Joe?
Fuck off and go bite your pillow, fat ass. And Barry, this isn't the only Resident Evil to package off character endings and purchasable DLC. For Christ's sakes, they did the same for Zoe, Chris, and Lucas in 7.
And Rose and Ethan in 8 as well.
Both of those games did not end with the questions that you had to buy the answers to. You can see Zoe and Ethan die respectively. Chris could have just been a cameo and maybe Lucas comes back later on. But with this, the game ends on the question of, how did Moira survive being crushed by 2 tons of concrete and then 6 months on the island? Better buy the DLC to find out, before fully ending the game.
He's too heated.
Jesus Christ, Bear.
I'm just saying that it's a fucked up way to tell a story by locking it behind a paywall. I mean, shit, they already did that with Asura's Wrath.
You've made your point, Barry. Don't go on one of your rants again. Rebecca isn't even anywhere near this game.
Asshole.
Besides, even with those points, they pale in comparison with the overall game itself. It doesn't feel like a condensed handheld port, and actually has a pretty decent runtime. In fact, I think you can casually play this game longer than the 3 make. But more importantly, Capcom seemed to find a great way to do co-op, with only one person using a weapon and the other being a tool to help the former. This way it keeps the tension balanced.
Yeah, you're right. The different unlocks you can do to improve you and your partner also kept things from being too stale. Plus, it didn't take away from the horror like 5 or 6 did, but also didn't feel like an overblown escort quest like 4. There are some character issues, of course, but that will be for the other rankings. Bottom line is that this was not only an improvement from the previous entry, but the first real step back in the right direction for Capcom.
Too true. And since the director for this game also helped direct the remakes of both 2 and 4, you can actually see the breadcrumbs they're leaving on their way to making some of the greatest Resident Evils we've had in years.
Facts.
Well, guys, I think that this one is a solid A tier. A lot of fun with more good than bad, agreed?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Sweet. Done. Okay, boys, let's take a quick break before we go to rank the characters. Did that fucking idiot just walk out?
I think he did.
What a deluded moron.